He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Stargate to the Cosmos. I am your host, Janet Lessin, and today we have a really big show with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin, another co-host, Kevin Estrella, and very special guest, Kevin Trimmel. And we had Anthony Zender scheduled. Maybe he will show up, but if not, we'll carry on without him. And so we've been doing a series of shows on the Secret Space program, and we had Kevin Trimmel with us many, many times, and he's awesome, and we're going to continue to dive into the Secret Space program, Kevin's involvement, and I also saw another friend of mine, Joanne. She might come in too. She's got some interesting information regarding the Secret Space program, and anybody else who wants to join us, we're more than welcome to have you on board. Hello, hi, Kevin. We're doing the intro, but this is Kevin Trimmel, right?
Yes. Yeah, and KJ's online. Have you been able to get a hold of her?
KJ Scoops?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to have a mad painter. I know he's pulled her in before. I'll direct him to do that. Okay, sounds good. So we're going to do a little sound check here. Oh, so good. You're coming in loud and clear, Kevin. Kevin Estrella, say hello. Say aloha.
We are here
whatever you
in
say.
presence.
What do you guys say in Canada? We say aloha in Maui.
We say, how's it going, eh? Take off.
How's it going, eh? That's great. That's great. Well, you're coming in good. Everybody here? Everybody okay?
Yep.
Sounds like it. Okay. Sasha. Sound check. Shalom. Okay. We're getting all these different greetings. That sounds good. And KJ, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, good. Yes, we can. Well, welcome to the show, everybody. Who am I missing? I got everybody. Okay. And a mad painter. You can hear everybody, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now that's cool. All right. Well, where do we want to start? We have a round table going here. Our main topic is the Secret Space program and all the people that have been a part of it, willingly and not. Are there any subtopics that anybody wants to throw out on the board that we can discuss tonight on the table here? A little virtual table.
Yeah. I'd like you to talk particularly about cloning and whether and what happens to the clones that don't make it, and about the voluntarism or otherwise in your program. Those are some topics that interest me.
Okay. So, Kevin, would you like to start? Kevin Trimmel?
Yeah, okay, sure. I understand that they do use cloning in the program, and this is still something I'm looking into myself. They have soul catcher technology where they can make a clone of someone, and they can bring your consciousness into the clone at any time. And how this works is it's almost like having two tuning forks. Because it's an exact copy of you, and your DNA resonates at a certain frequency, and yeah, they can absolutely bring you into a clone body, and that's why people don't really go missing. I have a theory that it's actually a lot of clones that are used in the secret space program, like just like Star Wars, you know, with the like stormtroopers are supposed to be clones originally. I think it's a lot like that. I think they have clones. And people remember being abducted. They remember even being trained. They'll train the host. They'll bring the host into the program. But then what happens is sometimes they'll end up cloning the host to bring in the consciousness that they trained, the original consciousness, because a clone won't have the original genius that a person has. Like if someone's really an adept painter or a really adept musician or an adept marksman, like is an awesome sniper. They'll make a clone, and it'll be an exact copy in terms of their mannerisms and acts like them, sounds like them, could fool their friends and family. But if you actually put the rifle in their arm, they couldn't really hit the mark the same way that the original could. So they found that out, and that's why they need to still bring in the original human genius, the original human consciousness into a clone body, which works perfectly because it's an exact copy of you. So your consciousness grips onto the DNA like a tuning fork. But that's just my own little perspective on it. I've asked other people about this, which I don't want to get into now. Everyone's kind of got a theory on it. But I hope that answers your question.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it does. I'd like to hear what the others have to say about it too.
Okay.
If you have anything you'd like to add to the any of you to the cloning discussion.
Hey, this is KJ. I don't, like Kevin, I don't know all of the ins and outs of cloning. I more have experience with like temporal displacement where they transfer your consciousness to use for time travel. But I assume that they use that with the clones as well. And they can't 100% clone you because you're an organic being. So there's always going to be, I guess you would say, there's always going to be something missing or different. But I do know a little bit about that they actually hold like they have holding facilities for clones, which I believe they have a big one on Earth, but they also have off planet. But they also have of everybody that are in the programs, they have your seed stock, is I guess what I would call it for lack of a better term.
What are you calling it? Seed stock?
Like your seed stock. Like there's your DNA. I guess, and they store it in different facilities, different places. And if you can have the ability to connect to certain aspects of yourself, you can actually connect to your seed stock and protect it. Or I personally have gone looking for mine, and because I can track things and go up and down the timeline and find different things, I was able to find mine in different places. And then they also have like the black market seed stock with it, which is another whole aspect. And there's a lot of layers of DNA basically being moved all around in different factions and different groups. So, that can be used for cloning or they also can use clones as sort of like a backdoor access to you. So if they can't.
Wait, why were you trying to get? Why were you trying to get? Did you get your own? Did you get them back? What were you doing looking for it?
I looked for it so I could see where it is and see who's using it. See if I can figure out what it's being used for, because there are certain beings that have, I guess you would say, more valuable genetics than others, meaning that it's based on like who you are as far as your potential for like during the timeline and what you will use for. So they will have a lot on some and very little on others, but either way, it's always a backdoor to you in some fashion.
What did they use you for? What did they use your seeds for?
Well, they've used it for all kinds of things, but I also believe they keep the DNA for people who do time travel too, because they have to keep your original, I guess, as close as possible, your original blueprint, so they can use you in different places for different reasons. There's people that talk about what they use them for. Some things like what Kevin says. You could have some parts of you, or I guess clones, doubles of you, that have different talents and different abilities, and they're used for different things, up from combat all the way down to like the human sex trafficking trade. So it's really, I don't know. I mean, I just know how I've tracked it with my own self. I'm not an expert on how it's done. But I do know that it's a very high commodity, people's DNA, and it's a big reason why we're dealing with a lot of stuff right now. And because we are the technology that is used to make a lot of changes on the timeline, and some people are used more than others, if that makes sense. But I don't want to, like, I'm not an expert, so I don't want to talk like I am. I know there's other people that know a lot more about it than me, but I just know that I have tracked even beyond the concept of your seed stock, your DNA.
You're coming in and out a little bit. I'm not sure what we can adjust on your end, but I have to ask. So you're saying that they use the technology. We human beings, our DNA is technology to change the timeline. This is correlating with some things that I know. First of all, Robert Heinlein said in his series of books from the 60s and 70s, especially it was in Stranger in a Strange Land, or else it was Time Enough for Love, he said, no one owns their DNA. It belongs to the universe. Now, he was apparently a whistleblower. He died years ago in a ripe old age, right? But we're going back to the beginning of the last century, of the 20th century. So
I've heard that phrase before, though, too.
Yeah, no one owns their DNA. It belongs to the universe, belongs to the cosmos. And when I read that, it was like, what? And this was back in 1973, when it was somewhere between 62 and 73. I read that, and they went, what?
Well, he might be right. I just want to say he might be right about the technically being a part of the genetic stock on the planet. Your physical body, the apis man, that was genetically manipulated and altered, and the missing link becomes apis man or Homo sapien. And so right now, physically, since we are we're actually considered an artificial being, humans. Now, the consciousness is unique, though. A consciousness, what we might think of as a soul, that is the divine, unique part that animates us, just like a driver in a car. But the actual vehicle for the consciousness to experience, we might actually just be leasing, the apis man, Homo erectus, which is actually an artificial being because we've been so genetically modified by different races. The reason they did that is because they actually think they own us. Just like Monsanto patenting certain seeds. Getting back to what KJ was saying about like seed stock, and so our genetics might actually be not considered ours per se because they have patents. The genetic farmer races actually genetically modified us to become Homo sapiens, and that's actually where that belief system in terms of DET is. That might actually be where it comes from. It's because physically we're actually leasing a car. Because they designed the car, they built the car, we're leasing it. But the consciousness, I will say this, the consciousness is absolutely divine, and it's unique, and that's us. But physically, we really have no presence here.
I've also heard that they treat us as like we're looked upon as royalty.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a Ferrari that's been tweaked, like in terms of genetic royalty, the physical body royalty, we're like a really expensive car because we've been tweaked so many times, if you want to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah.
And I also heard that we're very important because of the metagene. And they're not sure exactly how it emerges and when, but because we've been tweaked by so many species over so many, millions of years, this potential, the metagene, can come forth, and that's where we're able to manifest from higher realms of non-physicality into physicality at ever increasing rates. The more we wake up to our potential and become aware of that ability that we can literally be magicians and pull things in from the air. That's what happened at Montauk. We were just generating things from the air. The other correlation to this info, and I'll pass the talking stick, is that the Michael Newton Institute, in their Life Between Lives research, ask the soul about where they come from in the deep zeta state of subconsciousness through hours of hypnosis and regression. Eventually, they get to the Life Between Lives, and what these people say, there's like 40,000 people will regress, and they say we are a symbiotic creature. There's two of us. There's the soul and the bodies, and these bodies have their own will, their own consciousness, so to speak. And so there's an agreement when they come together for a life. And so sometimes the agreement isn't honored, and sometimes it is. And so then when the soul goes to the other side, it has to look at that. Did I respect my body? Did I honor my body? Did I do what we had agreed to before I stepped into it and, kind of was driving that car, leasing that car. Sometimes people lease a car and they abuse it, and sometimes people lease a car and they love it. So, back to the troops. Who wants to take the talking stick next?
Well, I know KJ has some really good information that she's been looking into on the gamma ray incident. She sent me an amazing email. She had done a lot of research on this recall that she has about the 1979 gamma ray incident, and we did talk about that last time. So to pass a talking stick to KJ, if you want to go into some more details that you found out about that.
Yeah, definitely. I have all my notes with me too. But I just wanted to, before we get into that, I just wanted to mention something that you were just talking about like being on the planet and like using the metaphor of as you're like a really fancy car. What this all reminds me of is like soul sparks, and it's a hard thing to explain, but the way I explain it, the way I understand it is, and I don't speak in a very like fancy esoteric way like some people do, so bear with me, but the way I understand it is that we are all, you hear about all the big spirits, the big names, I guess you'd call them, and those things are all here. But from what I understand is, I'll use like an example of a spirit of, I don't know, like, I guess we'll use the example of ISIS, because that's what we'll talk about. From what I understand, that spirit has broken up. When you incarnate, it's broken off into many people. So, like, you hear the term, we're not just one person. We are other people too. That goes into having other versions of yourselves. And so, example, like, for that being, that spirit could have split maybe like 1 billion times in 1 billion people, and all those people still have the exact same, I guess you would call, shot at rising up and doing what they need to do as far as know thyself. And I look at it as Source and Earth's kind of fail-safe, where they're not going to just put one spirit into one person and give them all of that power, because that would be foolish. You would probably end up being killed. So I believe the spirits are spread out amongst many people, and as time goes on and you rise up through your personal path, I guess you'd call it, your journey, you do get granted gifts from Source, and you do start activating your DNA, and you get downloads, and you learn more about yourself. You start learning more about everything around you, and you start embodying the spirit more and more and more. And the way I look at it is there's many spirits, but then there's the main driver. And you can't just be a main driver. You're not born a main driver, but you can evolve to that. And so there are certain beings on the planet that have a higher percentage of the spirit in them versus the other ones that also show spirit. You can have, 25 people can say I was Isis, or I was, Enki, or whoever it is they believe they were, or they find out they were. They can all say that, yeah, I was that being. But they all have a different percentage of that in them, which gives them more ability, which is kind of like what a lot of the projects are about, is they're finding these beings, these people who possess these spirits, and that's when they start putting in the programs and start adjusting them and throwing in influences to kind of steer them where they want to be. And those the people don't even really, a lot of people don't know who they are.
I'm right on with you. Beautiful. I love what you're saying, and it's really interesting that right now people are feeling the wave of the archetypes moving within them, asking them, "This is your time to make your move." And what I find is there's a subtle racism if we're not careful, that maybe the ETs have, but that people, no matter what their genetics, have their own unique lights to shine, and to value some over others is to minimize the possibility of seeing this universe as it is from so many perspectives. And I think that we need to embrace all, just because these people have better technology or hidden knowledge and medicine and stuff does not make us inferior beings. We are passionate creatures with our own lights to shine. That's my take.
Right.
I agree with that too.
People that abuse the privilege of having a spirit, and like you said, you have some people treat their car well and some people don't, and they find out that steers their timeline, and ultimately, depending on how, because you're connected to all the other people that are also the same spirit, so that when you heal yourself, it bleeds through to them. So you can, there are ways to heal the whole if you're aware of who you are, and not. I don't suggest you tell everybody if you do find out who you are, because that could be bad. But what matters is that we're not just one, we're many. So when you heal yourself, you heal everything else, and that heals the consciousness little by little. And you also can possess many spirits too. You're not just one. So, some people kind of steer themselves towards something.
You're breaking out in and out for some reason, KJ, and I'm not sure what's going on with your mic there. So maybe slow down your words, because it's going a little bit, and I don't know if we can adjust that at break or something. But I'm very interested in what you're saying, because when I did some regression years ago, like 25, 30 years ago, I found myself strongly identifying with Nima. And Nima, one of her names is Isis, so you hit right on. And I was, walking up a pyramid, saying goodbye to Father Anu, getting on a mission, going to there, all this stuff in this regression. I was crying. I really felt it to the core of my being. And subsequently, I've had lots of connections to Nima, of the archetype, to healing the planet, to getting away from the nuclear holocaust, and identifying as the mother and the world and everybody's my children, and we got to stop this. So that kind of inspires me to do things at a higher level than if I was just Janet, and I was just getting by and go through life and live. And another one that I've heard that, and I think she has it well known, is Penny Bradley. So I've had this discussion with many of the people that are identifying as different aspects of the Anunnaki, and so we've had these lengthy conversations with Marduk, and nobody's claiming to be the one, but it's I like the Marduk guy goes, yeah, I'm Marduk, and he's doing the same thing he did as the original Marduk. I'm everybody. There's only one God, and I'm everything, and I'm Anu, and I'm Enki, and I'm Yahweh. And so it's a very interesting phenomenon. And I think because we write the Anunnaki books, we have 4 that Sasha and I put together, and we have a website, Enki Speaks. We get a lot of the correspondence. So you are so spot on. How did you come by this awareness and this information? Are you identifying with one of the archetypes like Isis?
Oh, I know. I definitely don't talk about my own spirits on the radio, but I'm a healer too, and I've done a lot of work over the years, and a lot of experiences where I've had spiritual and a lot of downloaded information, a lot of it's very many instances. But over time, I'm also a tracker, so I track things. I basically have a ability to kind of, my mind can swim through a chaotic mess of information, and I kind of just try to pinpoint those. They show up in my dashboard as a red blinking light, when I hear people talk, or if I read something will just subconsciously hit me, and so then I start following that. And I also have a lot of really good friends and people that I'm connected to that are extremely geniuses and brilliant people who I've learned a lot from as well. And we have a lot of groups that are not public that we discuss really in-depth topics. So it just kind of comes with learning and knowing. And I've been practicing for many years on how to tap into my subconscious too. So I ask a lot of questions to source, and I do a lot of work on myself. So I've learned a lot, and some of my best healing work is when I sit in a bathtub for 3 hours with a big bag of Epsom salt, and I just zone in and connect. I get a lot of things resolved. The key is that you have to resolve your own trauma and your own things that are in your life that are blocking you, because you're also healing the others too, the other versions of you, anybody that's connected to you DNA wise, like your children. I always include my children in my healing. Even if they're not around, if I'm revoking soul contracts, or if I'm doing something like that, I will include them. I will speak. I'll say I'll do this on the behalf of you. So you can heal a lot of people and do a lot of things if you're just consciously aware of what you're doing, and you include everybody in it in a non-selfish way and with true intention to heal. And I think there is a point in your awakening. Some people have already personally rised up pretty high in their own spiritual level, so they might this might sound familiar to them, but I do believe that there is a point if you just keep pushing and keep trying, and keep peeling away the multidimensional layers of just basically the garbage and things that are attached to you, that you do kind of get to a threshold where you will be gifted more percentage of that spirit. And this is something that I don't have proof of this. This is something that I've read into and tapped into and asked questions about. And I believe that there is a point where you can hit like a threshold of like really like, I mean, healing never ends, but it's play with this whole word you hear, which is like the race for the soul. Yeah, there's a lot of people that want to buy, trade, sell our soul energy, but there's also a race for yourself too, because I don't know if the percentages stay the same in everybody forever. I don't know because when you talk about passengers and the main driver of the spirit, is there a point where the main driver really gets to a point where they kind of intake the rest of more percentage of the rest of it? This is kind of like a theory that many of my close friends have talked about, and wondering at what point do you get there, and what is it like when you get there? And a lot of people say, oh, I've had all these visitations with these high spirits.
And also too, KJ, what you're saying there, I've done a lot of major cleansing, and friends of mine have done cleansing, and out of nowhere they'll start saying words like, I'm starting to integrate.
Right.
And
Level
it's
up.
like level up or integrate. And yeah, I guess it has to do with these soul sparks where you're pulling in the healing. I actually am following what you're saying here. You're saying that you might be soul kind of fractured, but and the other fractures might not be in a state of healing. But once you start bringing in the healing and you ground that, you start to integrate, and you start actually pulling it in, and you become the one that's kind of aware of the other parts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and like, for example, I don't like to always name drop TV shows and movies, but a really good example of what I'm talking about too is when you're talking about other versions of yourself. If there's another version of yourself somewhere else in the world, they don't look like you. They could be anybody. If something horrible is happening to them, and they're another version of you, and they share spirits with you, and for example, maybe they're getting beaten up brutally, like you'll feel that in a different way in your physical body. So somebody might be choking them, but you might feel it like you have like a neck pain or like a headache, or your pain, your physical pain comes from somewhere. It's bleeding through from somewhere, because it's not natural to feel pain. So all pain has a frequency that comes from another place, whether it's the past or present or some other person. So it's all connected. So like when you heal yourself, you're healing that other person, and then vice versa. The thing is nobody's aware of who other. I know of other versions of myself, and there's one person that consciously knows that we're person. So we do work together to do stuff and heal. But I can't say, I don't really know that many people that know other versions of themselves and actually are consciously aware of it. It's pretty rare.
Yeah. In some sense, when other people hurt, the bell tolls for all of us. When the child from Syria washes up dead on the beach, I feel that.
Yeah, I mean, that could be that if you see like a photo of somebody, they could be a version of you. They could share a spirit with you, and it might hit you harder than, say, if you saw something that wasn't. So, and I want to get back. The TV show that talks about this, other versions, is Sense 8. And it's on UC on Netflix. You can find it online, but that's where you can, in the show, it's people. They only use 8 people, but most people have a lot more than 8. And then it shows how they figure it out, and they find each other, and they start connecting with each other. You can share abilities. You can help each other. in bad times, if you're aware. But I mean, that's Hollywood. In real life, it's not like I said.
Hollywood eyes.
Yeah, but it's real. We're just not conscious of that. A lot when people say, "Oh, we are many. We are not just one. We are many." A lot of people look at that as more of a philosophical thing versus we actually do have physical bodies that are versions. So, I think that there's a lot of very confusing information online about the soul and about what happens when we die and what happened in the past and who are all these beings. And we spend a lot of time trying to figure out stuff when what we really should do is tap ourselves in. A lot of that stuff will just kind of I don't delve into a lot of topics, but I do follow what my body tells me to do, what my heart tells me to do. And that's all anyone needs to do.
There are those that say there's only one life, and we're all just fractals of one life. So there's that level. There's those that we have. I was told at one time that there were like 20,000 fractals of the main archetypes incarnated in one time, in the hopes that at least one of them wakes up, because this awareness of waking up. When one wakes up, it affects all of them in a positive way. So there's more work you do on yourself.
Right. That's where the main driver comes in when you say, we hope one of them wakes up. That's that goes back to the idea that there's a main driver, and that main driver is somebody that has proved to source that they've earned what they've got. And like I said, those people will tap into their abilities faster. They're making the right decisions to heal themselves with the intention and the basically what a main driver is supposed to do, however that is, nobility, honor, loyalty, whatever it is that is required. If they can do it, then I guess that would be the main driver, the one. And there's probably there's every spirit, and there's a lot. So when you look at it that way, in my opinion, things don't look so as bleak as people think. There's a lot of people who are very negative in the truth community who just think we're doomed, and they forget about all of these multidimensional layers and layers and layers of people working, and then. Not only is this versions of us on Earth, but we have versions of ourselves on other timelines, on other dimensions. We have some of us have artificial intelligence versions of us. That's where you can see that. A lot of people are afraid of artificial intelligence, and you can find out if you can tap in. You can find out who your version is, and you can heal that, or in a way that is programmable for AI. We can turn everything around. We just have to be conscious. We have to be conscious observers of our timeline and who we are. And it's really an individual thing, but it's also as a whole too. We heal ourselves, but we have to heal with the intent to heal everything. So, because when I heal, I consciously think, okay, this is healing me, but it's healing lots of others too, and they're completely unaware of it. But that's okay, because that's why we're here. It doesn't matter if you get recognition for healing anybody, because what matters is that people get healed. So that was my take.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, we haven't heard from Kevin Estrella. Would you like to chime in and add your 2 cents?
Oh, geez. Well, I know that conscious-wise, a great quote from David Bowie, one's life is like a complete, you discover who you are, who the person you're always meant to become, through self-discovery. And I think this is an important process with every human being for one to discover who they are and to become the best person of who of the reflection of the creator of who they were meant to be. I think there's many people who are asleep who do not are not aware of this consciousness, of this divine God consciousness that's inside them. But those who are aware are the ones who end up becoming these such great people, such great artists, great musicians, great painters, great thinkers, because they knew who they were and they became these wonderful people. And I think it's important for each human being to strive for this, to become that who you are, which no one else is. And I've been on this personal journey, and it continues. And even in my own music, say for instance, I've become a musician that I could not, no one else can emulate or try and imitate who I am, because they would have to be inside my consciousness for what I made the conscious decision to become. Like a Baroque, like a Baroque composer who plays metal. Like who does that? So it's remember Baroque classical is. So every person has that God consciousness, that creator source inside themselves that wants to be expressed.
Right on. Okay. Sasha, you have something to add before we go?
Oh, I'm just I'm in awe with all the wisdom coming from each of you, and it's such a turn on to listen to y'all. For me, I like to think that you can be aware of the hierarchy of the way your soul is supposed to progress, or you can say, as I do, that it's the journey rather than the goal, and how I work the journey, and the journey is the goal, and the means and dichotomy is just a way of organizing things. I think that totally what TJ said, being at peace with the parts of yourself, the aspects of yourself, allows you to be at peace with the way those manifest in other people, and to see how needs that you and other people have can cohere and synergize. And I think that it's a value to both be here now and not be here now, both to be able to embrace the limits of our physical body, whatever they are, if it's 1,000 years or 20 years, and the infinite, which is limitless. Anyway, those are some of the reflections I have from this wonderful discussion. What a turn on.
Okay. Kevin Trimmel, your turn.
Okay. Well, that was profound. What KJ was describing. I thought that was really profound. But I actually, I don't know how much time we have left, because we're going to come up on break.
We have it's 42 before the hour, so the break comes at 56 at the top of the hour.
Well, and also, I also want KJ to get into the gamma ray thing, because she's actually done a lot of due diligence on this. It's something that I think is very profound, and we have talked about this a couple times before in various interviews, and it's something we've been looking into since the summer of 2017, and she has continued to do her due diligence as a remote viewer, but also a researcher to fact check actually what she's scanning. So I think it's really neat here, because yeah, KJ, why don't you go ahead? You have your notes in front of you?
Yeah, I do. And so I don't know if you all recall what we talked about the last time. I know there's Kevin is new, or Kevin Estrella is new.
Assume nothing. Start from the get-go.
Okay, just a brief.
Yes, there's new people coming onto the show.
Okay, so what we had released in October is an incident that happened in 1979 involving 22 children in the secret space program. And what had happened was each child was taken from their timeline in the organic timeline that we live in now, and whatever age they were removed from, they went on their respective timelines that they went to in the future, and they were trained in whatever abilities that they were trained in. So I don't know if that that means mystery schools or, secret space program training. I'm not really sure about each individual child's training, but each one was, I would consider a psychic folder. And what happened was they were all taken from their spots that they were in, and they were brought to 1979 back in time to a San Diego naval base and put on a submarine and brought to Exmouth, Australia, which is a 2-hour ride from San Diego. And it's on, I said, yes, it was northwest. It's more western, but a little bit north. But it's on the very tip of this peninsula, and it's a U.S. military base called. It's Exmouth, Australia. It's the it's just due west of the Pine Gap facility, which is I'm sure many of you have heard of Pine Gap. It's a joint military defense base that is basically jointly operated by Australia and the U.S.
Right. Yeah.
And so Exmouth is to the west of that on the coast, and so we were brought there. And the memory that I have was that it was the children didn't know each other, brought out, and we were brought to this facility, and we created a circle, or a sphere, I guess you could call it, in sacred geometry, and we locked hands, and we somehow created a psionic energy blast between all of us. And there was a child in the center of it. And I did release a list of the names. I'm not going to release the list tonight. I did the last interview, but I did release the names of everybody that I know that are involved. And so we were used to create an energy blast, and it was used to destroy a satellite that was in the orbit to protect us, to protect humanity. So, and then the explosion was very large, so it created an actual sightings from people on the Earth. So, NASA released a statement explaining what they thought it was, and it's searchable. It's called the March 5th, 1979 gamma ray incident, which is, you can look it up online. And it basically, they don't have a smoking gun for it. It's kind of blamed it on an incident or event based on quantum physics, and they only have the blast itself to give them intel on what it is. So after that happened, we were put back on the sub, went back to San Diego, and when we were using a pump room, and we went back to our spots that we came from in the future, and then two children had a guardian. And this is part of my next stuff that I found out, because my guardian was my grandfather, who was he was in the Marines, and he was a marksman, but he was the person that would me for these things. So so that was the incident, and we had released that, and lots of crazy things happened since then, and kind of been a little bit under target, saying so, not too bad, but enough to be noticeable. And so that was what we released. So what I found out since, because I didn't really know how it was related to everything else. So I started looking into it, and then I looked into Australia and the Australia history of the secret space MKL, and I started looking into the Pine Gap base, which is located in the center of the country. And so there's other people that have been releasing some information, and most recently, a journalist called the Dark Journalist, I don't know if you've heard of him, he's releasing a series called the X series, which is all about the X technology, which he did a big thing on Pine Gap, which was incredibly interesting because I found out that Pine Gap also facilitates X-Smith base, and it also has a sister base in Guam, which is the base that my grandfather was stationed at. So there is that connection there. But let me just, I wrote down a bunch of stuff that I wanted to explain too. So I guess X-Smith is a Boeing HARP facility. So everybody kind of chalks it up to just like being a HARP facility. With weather. That's what most people think HARP is. But where we were standing, and if you could look online, the actual location is quite interesting with the photos. It's set up ultimately like a gigantic, like a murder festival. So, and it has a center access there, and it's called an access mudra. So an access mudra is where like a center point is established. So in the center of this, the access point, it's actually, from what I can see, it can create all kinds of shapes, geometric shapes, which if you mix that with the psionic abilities and interconnected with like the ley lines in Australia, it all gets connected. It connects to Smith goes straight to Pine Gap. It goes straight to the capital of Australia, and it also goes straight to the Vatican. And once you start following the lines, you realize that it's following all of the ley lines. So I started looking more deeper into what's going on at Pine Gap. So I had found out that they have, and this is all not stuff anybody can find out, but I'm trying to connect it to some incidences that happened in the 1970s. And they have a 5-mile long, deep, I guess you'd call it an underground antenna that is at Pine Gap. And it's the biggest surveillance base in the world, in the Eastern Hemisphere, I guess is what I understand. And so then I started realizing that they're using energy to connect to the antipodes, which is like an antipode is the opposite of point on the globe. So X-Smith, the antipode for X-Smith, is actually the Bermuda Triangle. And the antipode for Pine Gap is in the center of the Atlantic Ocean, near I believe the tropic of Capricorn. So everything that they're doing there is affecting the entire globe. So I wanted to explain how
I want to say something about, I have a little insight maybe.
Yeah.
Another whistleblower, and we are going to come up with a break, so we might be able to finish this, but I'll just add this. In the first week of July 1947, it wasn't just the Roswell craft, it was 5 craft. There were 5 craft delivered. It was intentional. They made it look like a crash, but they intentionally delivered, this is like the Greys, and they intentionally delivered 5 craft, which like the Trojan horse, the Curiosity of Humans, we pulled it into our inner facilities. And so they monitored the whole Earth, so it makes sense. The one in Pine Gap was one of the 5 crafts delivered in July 1947, which was, of course, the time of the quote-unquote Roswell crash. So that what you were doing, and they delivered them on particular lines, so these are special places. And it was intentional where they delivered them, and it's intentional where they ended up being. So I understand there is some kind of major base there where you're located underground, so perhaps that's what's going on. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when we come back from the break, I'll let KJ finish her point, but this also gets into something that Kevin Estrella asked me when I said the British Commonwealth countries, they have their own little secret space program, and it has to do with Australia, New Zealand, and the UK and Canada and other countries. But it's also what KJ was saying about opposite points on the globe. If you look at England and New Zealand is kind of like the UK of Australia. And if you reverse it, because it's like opposite sides on the globe, depending on how you look at it, Australia, most people don't know this, but geographically, it's actually just as big as the United States. They always make it look smaller on our globes, but it is literally another United States. So anyway, we can talk about that more later.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, I actually read about that the reason why Pine Gap is at Australia is because of the landmass, and it's like solid landmass where, like, because what they do is they send energy up into the atmosphere and then it goes back down, and they need a gigantic facility that can kind of handle and take that energy.
Well, let's hold that thought, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. You have to take a commercial break. We'll be back in 5. See you soon.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Join me weekdays for my new show, Tell Chris Joe. It's going to be a problem show brought to you live from Kensington. Thursdays, I'm dealing with hot topics, heated debate, what's new around the world, and ring-ins to discuss listeners' problems and offering considered and heartfelt solutions. So join me, Chris Hart, for Tell Chris Joe. Stop what you're doing, grab a cup of tea. I'm coming live from Kensington. Relax, let me entertain you with a coffee bar online. Listeners' very personal problems. So that's Thursdays, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. See you there. It's going to be lots of fun.
Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter at spacedoutradio, and on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show. Spaced Out Radio. It's a night of talk and interaction. Are you experienced?
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha and welcome back to Stargate to the Cosmos, and I'm Danica Lessin with my co-host Dr. Sasha Lessin and Kevin Estrella. Our producer is Thomas Becker. Our guests today are Kevin Trimmel and KJ Scoops. Before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to the donation button on revolution.radio and make a donation. And we do appreciate whatever you do donate. We need your donations to keep these shows on the air, like this one, and to bring you more shows. Dad Painter, Thomas Becker, how are we doing? How's our count?
I don't know. I'm not in there. That's what I was saying.
Okay.
Break.
That's what you're saying. So it's a mystery, but we do need your money. Just go over and donate, please.
And
alrighty. So
she's not answering the phone.
Oh, and KJ is not picking up the phone.
Oh, we lost KJ?
Did she come in? Did she come in on Skype? Can you text her, Kevin, and tell her
I'm
trying to get her? Maybe.
What? She was on earlier. It's her Skype.
Yeah. Maybe she had to reboot or something. Anyway,
I think she's coming in
Kevin,
on Skype. That's what I told her.
She's coming in on Skype. Yes. And you picked her up before on Skype.
I think that's what we did last time, and that's what we did earlier. Yep.
Go ahead. I'm mad. What's going on?
It's saying it's ringing. So it just hung up. All failed.
Okay. What can she do? Reboot or something?
No, I have no idea. Call me, you know.
Call. Okay.
Here, I'll send her a message on Skype, and we'll see if she can answer back.
Okay. Hold on, people, while we have technical difficulties. While you're doing that, there is a chat in our Skype that you can talk to each other under our show page, if you want to do that. And
let
we
me
have all
just
the taking noise.
Kevin, tell us about the British Commonwealth secret space program.
Okay, yeah, sure. This is actually a little bit separate from what the United States is doing. And the United States also has inroads in certain European countries as well. So there's a couple of different secret space programs. The British Commonwealth has to do with Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, India, and they also have some enclaves in a couple other countries, which I'm not going to name now. I need to do more research into that. But basically what you see in the British Commonwealth that is representative of a different secret space program that works alongside the Americans, and also the Fourth Reich Nazis, which don't really have a presence here aside from some bases in South America and Antarctica. But what it is they're all kind of doing their thing, and there's also a secret space program that the Russians and the Asian countries are working on. But it gets really complicated because you got Russia, and they have a secret space program. They work very closely with China and a couple other Asian countries. But then the Japanese have an entirely different secret space program, which has nothing to do with the Russians or the Chinese. So you have at least 5 different secret space programs. One of them, some people might find hard to believe that there's still a Fourth Reich Nazi, or what you would think of as, I guess, a Third Reich continuation of World War II, the Nazis going to South America and Antarctica, but they absolutely got helped at the end, and that's like the 5th component. And yeah, you have like at least 5 different secret space programs from planet Earth that are doing their thing. And the moon is like a Switzerland. It's considered a neutral like landing port or a way station, and that has to do with the fact that under these 5 secret space programs, they were never in control of the moon. It's not like America discovered it or the Nazis discovered it in terms of being the first person there. When they got there, there's already a presence on the moon, and that's really when things took off in the 1930s, because it was actually the Germans that actually made it to the moon first, and then the Russians and the Americans. Yeah, sorry, I don't know.
What about this other presence on the moon when, what was already there? Tell us about that.
It had been a Draco base for a long time. It was brought here originally. It's not native to the solar system, and there's always been a presence there, but there's also been wars there in the past. And what I mean by the past, even 10,000 years ago, which in the grand scheme of things is just like a little blink on the radar in terms of even Earth history, because the Earth is, in terms of it being a gaseous ball, it's a billion years old. And so like 10,000 years ago, there was wars there between different Draco. You have the Anunnaki coming in. That's a hybrid species, as we know. They have some Draco in them. They also have other species that intermingled with them, and that kind of is what became the Anunnaki. They have different species, and they're very much hybrids. And it was...
what are they a hybrid of? Because we're very interested in the Anunnaki.
In terms of what I know from my experience, I know that what we consider an Anunnaki, and like this isn't. I think they've been hybridized a couple times, but I know that they mixed not only with the Draco, they mixed with the Syrians, and there's at least three different races from Sirius. One of them is a wolf-like race, and they mix with the wolf-like race. Absolutely, that's where you get the Anubis, Anu, King Anu of the Anunnaki. That's the Anubis, a wolf-headed being. Who was the sky father of ancient Egypt. But Egypt was one of the newer little colonies or bases that broke off from ancient Sumer. And this has been going on for a long time, where you have reptilian species intermingling with other species. And I think we're all familiar with them creating the primitive worker from Homo erectus. And this gets back to the whole thing about us not owning our own DNA. We own the Homo erectus in terms of the native hominid that was actually evolving here naturally before all these beings showed up. Absolutely, that's actually about 98% of us. Like, you can watch a lot of even comedians, and they'll talk about us like they're like, we're 98% ape. Well, what's the other 2%? Well, that's the ET. That's the missing link. They know that we're absolutely 98% ape. I think it's like 98.6. We're actually identical to a chimp, like 98.6. But there's something in that little percentage, the missing link, that they can't figure out in terms of us and our apis man genetics. There does appear to be a little jump, the missing link, and they can't quite figure that out. That's why it's missing. And it's obviously ET. And ET, they were a hybrid on top of a hybrid on top of a hybrid. So they've been hybridized many, many times. So that little bit of percent, maybe 1.4, 1%, that made Homo erectus into what we are now, Homo sapiens, that's what they did to us. They tinkered with us. They gave us their minds, that classic saying. The predator from the cosmos gave us their minds. They gave us that's all we needed. We just need that little push, but it's also kind of compromising us a little bit. I think that little push is like just putting a tiny bit of poison into water, a glass of water. You just put a dab of something into water, like distilled water. That's restructured water, and DNA's like that. You can literally put something good. Like you can put a little bit of essential oil, some rose oil into a glass of distilled water. H2O, we're mostly made of water, and H2O, it's like pure memory. It's a blank slate. And you put like a dash of rose oil or essential oil into distilled water. It's not water anymore. Now that's rose water. So if you follow me on this, I think they just put a dab of what they were, but I think they were hybridized so many times that it was so potent. Their DNA, reptilian, insectoid, wolfin, various other species, when they put that little bit of DNA in us, that's the missing link, and then we became what we are now, which is Homo sapien. And I think we're actually a bit compromised because it's a whole other subject, but I think Homo erectus was actually about to evolve into Homo luminous, and I think we're totally living in harmony with nature. We weren't just like what they depict in the textbooks, saying that we're just dumb apes swinging from trees, eating fruit, and we were basically monkeys. No, we were a divine species, very much like the psychic Sasquatch, living totally in harmony with nature, but fully sentient, fully aware. We raised our young, we cared for other people, we buried our dead, and those are signs of actually immense intelligence. When you care for your young, you bury your dead, you have your little rituals, you take care of everybody, and that's what Homo erectus was. And I think we were, back then, if we really want to get into it, back then, there was more Ormus content. There's more volcanic activities. So we had more pre-metals coming up into the atmosphere and being absorbed by various superfood plants. And this has to do with monoatomics. And we were absorbing a lot more Ormus gold because back then there was more volcanic activity. And we're as Homo erectus, we were absorbing superconductors in fruit and roots and all the different stuff that we're eating off the land, and everything was organic. And by the way, distilled water is rainwater. Mother Nature only makes distilled water. And so we were drinking a lot of rainwater. We were eating a high Ormus content. We had this divine ape DNA. This is us before the missing link. So I think what happened was we were actually doing just fine, and they purposely chose us because we were so strong and sentient. But we decided not to go the technology route because we were living in harmony with nature. And I think that's why they actually chose us to become the primitive worker, and they compromised their DNA. So anyway, yeah.
Wow, fascinating. Sasha, you have anything to say before we put back KJ back on the hot seat and talk to her about where we left off?
No, let's hear KJ.
What about what do you think about that whole?
That was a far out rap, man.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
It was
KJ coming in now?
Way comprehensive. I dug it.
I've been drinking. I only drink distilled water. I've drank distilled water for 7 years now straight. I haven't drank tap water in so long, and it makes a huge difference.
It really does.
My water comes from the mountain, directly from the source. In Maui here, and the mountain behind us is the wettest spot on Earth.
Well, on this program, let's just dispel this whole water thing. There's two kinds of water, and you got your distilled, that's pure H2O, and I love that. Distilled's good. It really does purify you. That's like rainwater, assuming the rain isn't polluted, right? That's pure rainwater. And then all it is, because it has magnetic properties, it can draw impurities from you. And there's all this bad science out there that it actually leaches minerals from your body, and that's not true. It just leaches the bad minerals, the iron oxide, the bad calcium, all these bad minerals. It actually has this magnetic property where it actually leaches the bad minerals. But of course, they tell you don't drink distilled water. That's like someone saying don't ever drink rainwater, it will kill you. That's just bad science. But then also, too, you got the spring water, and based on the area, the minerals in spring water can make it more alkaline. And that's the thing about distilled is it's not that it leaches minerals from the body, it only leaches bad minerals, but because of its magnetic properties, it doesn't have, it's neutral, it doesn't have the same alkalinity. So if you don't add in alkaline elements, it can technically make you acidic eventually if you don't add in other alkaline elements. So I like to drink both. I bring in the distilled to cleanse, and then a good spring water, like what you were talking about, directly from the source. It doesn't strip away the bad minerals, but it is more alkaline, so it can raise your pH. So that's just what I wanted to say about water.
Thank you.
I actually do buy my distilled water, and then I put it through a filter. Actually, after that, I put it through just because, I don't always trust what you buy in a store. But I buy gallons and gallons at a time. I have a shelf at my house, and I live in the city too, so I don't trust tap water. But it's funny because I've loaded my cart up, and I've had work look at me and ask me, "Are you sure you want that kind? You know that's distilled, right?" It's just a natural thing that people shun distilled water, and you used to only be able to find it in automotive stores, that people use to clean their engines with, or in the pharmacy area. Now more people are selling it, but you can only buy it in big, large quantities. They don't sell it in little bottles yet or anything. But yeah, there's a huge stigma against it, and I disagree. I put distilled water in all my babies' bottles. When they first had water, they had distilled water. I breastfed, but anyways, my point is that they grew up on distilled water, and they're super healthy. So that's my.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. A lot of people say that too about distilled, and they say that distilled will leach minerals from your body and will kill you. And I just laugh to myself because it's okay, so you wouldn't drink rainwater, so rainwater is going to kill you. So anyway, yeah, I totally get what you mean.
Yeah, all right. Wow. Best to just follow your own heart and don't listen to what other people say when they rain on your parade,
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I agree. As long as you're healthy, I think you're doing something right. I worry about the water because it's not going through this nap, but I always say it's not going through the chemicals, getting fluoride added. We filter it up here best we can, and there's nothing you can do about the pollution in the air except filter it later. But we're getting everything. We're getting all the minerals, all the natural stuff. So we've been Sasha's been drinking it for 40 years, right? 40 years now. So he's amazingly healthy. So we were going to continue on with what you were talking about before the break and before we lost you. We got you back. KJ, would you like to pick up where you left off? I know you have some notes. Can you hear me? Uh-oh.
Well, yeah, she was talking about
Okay, I'm here. Sorry, I was muted.
Oh, you were muted. Okay.
I'm sorry. I was just talking to myself. So basically, I was just trying to research more my own experience, in which my experience was solely in, as far as I know, in Exmouth, Australia. So when I started looking into the Pine Gap facility, I realized that that facility is much more interesting and has a lot more going on, connected globally to this place. And basically, they monitor satellites there, and they, from what I've found from watching, ex-employees and authors and people that have talked about as much as they can, they basically say it's like the most secret surveillance space in the world, and they monitor everything. And they say it's to monitor wireless communications and or like missile activity in like Russia or China. But there's always that other but it also monitors quote unquote things of interest to the surveillance agencies. We all know their names. And so when I found out that they had a connection to the Guam base, and then they have a connection to the Exmouth base, and they also have connections to satellites, it kind of piqued my interest. So then I started looking into it, and I had learned that this all goes back to like the Nixon era time, and we had a lot to do with this base. And so what I wanted to mention was they have, I guess in the past, they've launched some satellites and they've lost communication with the satellites, and they didn't know why. And they launched a satellite called the Prospero satellite. And this isn't my information. I actually got this off the journalist, so I was super impressed with it. But they had launched a satellite a few years before. I think it was 1975. I might not be right with that date, but it was right around there when they launched this satellite, which, if you go back in the symbology, goes back to the Tempest story by Shakespeare. And so they launched this big, expensive satellite that was supposed to be the latest and greatest thing to monitor everybody. And then, from what I understand, that they lost communication immediately when it got out of their range, and they knew something was communicating with it, but they didn't know what. So this thing was launched to be orbiting for 100 years. And they just immediately lost contact. So my first instinct was they prepared to try to figure out how to get contact with that thing, no matter what means. And so I started looking. Can you still hear me? Because I hear silence. So just want to make sure you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So I started realizing that in my research that I was looking into articles that it's connected to Nikola Tesla, and because he had invented, and I'm just reading this, this isn't from me, I want to make sure I say it correctly, but I'm just going to read this one thing. In 1899, Nikola Tesla invented a process of sending currents through the globe by transmitting energy in the form of standing waves in the Earth's crusty upper atmosphere. He could transmit almost unlimited amounts of energy to any place on the globe. The U.S. has a low-frequency transmitter at the South Pole, which is similar to Tesla's process. And this is, I guess, would be called superharmonics, I guess, for like a layman's term for it. And so superharmonics of this frequency has been used by the U.S. Navy in Northwest Cape. Northwest Cape is Exmouth. That's the other name for it. It's been used, and also at Pine Gap. So basically, there's also another author named Stan Deo who wrote about Pine Gap. And he believes that Pine Gap is possibly involved in both upper atmospheric subsurface research with this Bohr antenna. That's the 5 mile antenna. And he believes that Pine Gap is just a facility, like a nuclear facility, that is just there to power this antenna, and steer it and everything. And so they can tune this thing, and it creates a standing wave field around the entire planet from this one location. So
it's obviously part of HAARP. Obviously, it's got to be part of HAARP. They caused the tsunami that hit that hit Fukushima.
Right.
Is this part of the trip?
Well, I'm finding out that what's happening is, and the other part is that they believe that they're using a high velocity, high energy plasma accelerator, or like what you'd call it, like a death ray, or a plasma cannon, is another like term that he used. So this, we know what this type of technology is, but it goes back to all of these facilities, like the Exmouth base. Like I wanted to go back to the Access Mundi, that the center point of these locations all connect to other locations that are also arranged to receive this energy. So you know how the lines work. It goes back in time to the more natural ones, where you get like the obelisks and the pyramids and the temples, and they're all built on these spots. So, so basically, what can do is Nikola Tesla was known for transmitting like and I'm just trying to find my notes again, so I don't want to say the wrong thing because I have taken so many notes. But so basically they can launch a ball of energy at these antipodes, and it breaks off in a wave. And the same deal with all of, and it just connects. But that's all on the Earth's surface. So they're using other technology in conjunction with this and human beings to, I guess, project into the outer surface, the atmosphere, beyond our, beyond our atmosphere. I think that they've, like we talked about in the roundtable in October, that there's all these things that have gone on in the 70s that are kind of little things to take certain things out of place so that they can kind of have free rein to do what they're doing. And one of those things was exploding the satellite. And a few years before that, they launched this other satellite that they lost contact with, and they had to figure out why. So we're just piecing the puzzle pieces together. I can't say everything is absolute, and I'm still looking into it. But one of the things I found interesting was with the whole symbology and the sacred geometry that they also put into play. If you look at an aerial map of Pine Gap, you can see like the terrain right above where this antenna is. It looks like a gigantic eye. And then the Pine Gap facility looks like it would be placed where you would see like a tear duct in the eye. And I don't know if you know about Pine Gap, but symbology, a lot of people say the pine cone is your pineal gland, but it also represents pain in ancient like Latin, and it's also a symbol for pain. And it's interesting how the if you think about it, like the pain gap, because the antipode for Pine Gap is in the center of the Tropic of Capricorn, which is in the Great Divide range that's under the ocean. So there's not only like control of human beings going on, but it's also esoterically used to use that aspect to control our spirit and our multidimensionality too, using geometry. And, you know, it hit home for me because I was involved in some of this stuff. So, and a lot of pieces of this stuff that I'm saying, you know, everybody's heard little things like about the ley lines and in those little pieces of the puzzle. So we're just all here trying to put it all together. But yeah, I think there's a lot more to it. I just I'm just trying to share what I know and what I've learned and how there. Oh, and the other thing too is somebody had released that there's photos. They have something there which I don't know a lot about. I'm still learning about it, but they have something there called the Ultra Room, which the what I've heard is it's a room that only Americans can go, and I don't know how true that is, and I don't even know if that's the real name for it. But somebody got a photo of it, and that's online as well. So my instinct, being like a psychic and a tracker, is they probably are using jump runes there now, or something better. But back in 1979, we had to get on a submarine, so I'm sure the technology is far better now than it was then. You know, there's probably no submarines now. They probably just jump people in, teleport, or time travel, or whatever it is they use. So there's a lot going on, and a lot of signs point to Australia. A lot of stuff. So, anybody?
Right. Yeah. No. That was awesome. Thank you so much, KJ. That was awesome. She's really looked into the details of this. She's a very good remote viewer, but then she does her due diligence and she actually fact checks this stuff. And it's weird when all these synchronicities keep adding up. I didn't even know what like that much into it. Which like especially the you're saying the Tropic of Cancer.
Capricorn.
Capricorn. Okay, Capricorn.
It's the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And then if you just go west to Exmouth, that's it down south at Bermuda Triangle, but it's like dead on Bermuda Triangle. So you can imagine, like, with the stories you've heard through history of the Bermuda Triangle, and then you start wondering how the hell does that happen? And then you start learning about the natural, because you know, the pyramids, the Mayans, and you have all these old things on the planet. Before they had this technology, now they've got all these synthetic morphos and these synthetic, like, they're using electricity and human beings in a more less natural way. I think back in the day, they were tapping in more of the natural ability, and then they started messing with time travel, probably more in the 21st century, and then started really inserting laws. It just really jumbled it all up. But yeah.
Right. Okay. I have a question for KJ. Unless you guys do, I know you guys are the interviewers.
Go ahead. No, we can. This is roundtable. Whatever. Everybody can ask questions.
Thank you so much, KJ, for filling in more blanks on that. A question I have. Could you talk more about, I know we had the share recall of us in the underground barracks, and from my perspective, you were removed from that group. And if you could talk about what happened to you after you were removed from the barracks. I remember it was Dave Merrow was in the barracks, and there's about 20 other people, and you were in there, and you got removed because you were going around saying, we're going to remember this, and then the next day you were gone. So if you could just speak more to that.
Yeah, well, this was before I even met you, met you now, but when I saw your interview, you had explained that story, and right as you were talking, I was real time seeing it, the memory happened. And I was like, oh, and then I listened to the rest of your interview, and I asked Denny that if I could get, if you could ask you if it's all right if I contact you, because I don't want to just contact people. And you gave me your email, and then I talked to you, and I basically, what you had said is you remembered a blonde girl sitting on the bench in a base, like a bunk room setting, and that I absolutely remember that. And I remember when I contacted you, I was like, yeah, that I believe that was me. And I've actually known from my memories and from memories of other people, I'm kind of known to risk getting in trouble for truth. And so I've had past lives where I've been killed and hung for holding papers for the rebellion and all kinds of things. So it's not unlike me to go against protocol, and if it means like we have to remember this, So I remember telling you something, and I don't remember exactly what I said. It was something in addition to we have to remember this, but I told you something, and I remember Dave Marrow being there, and I remember somebody else like kind of listening in on the conversation or talking with us. But then I remember being removed from the room shortly after that because everything's monitored. And basically it's like you just got to say it and take the fall. So I was put into isolation. So I had no contact with anybody. That was my punishment. And then shortly after that, I was moved to a different program, and I went into a training program and to learn how to fly ships, basically, and become a pilot. And I'm still tracking a lot of that stuff, that other aspect of my memory. But yeah, as far as that scenario with you, I remember I'm having a hard time remembering the other things that I said. But yeah, I remember Dave Marrow for sure. And
that was one of those key things I remember too, because he was sitting off in the corner in the barracks. People had gathered around in like small groups or sitting on the little beds they had set up, and he was actually sitting with his back against like this wall, but in the corner. And we talked about this in a round table. It's just a little detail. Everyone was kind of very white looking, and but everyone's telepathic. Okay, so everyone's chatting, and he's off in the corner, and they're saying like, "What is this? What's this black guy doing in our group?" And what he said to us was, "I'm Egyptian." That's a key point, because he is half Egyptian and half Scottish, actually. And this goes back to the British Commonwealth. And if you look at the history of England and Egypt as well. And so I just thought it was interesting because he had darker skin than everyone. He's sitting off in the corner, and everyone's kind of chatting telepathically. And eventually he just said, "I'm Egyptian," because some people had commented on the fact that he was darker skin. And that's such an important detail, because he is indeed half Egyptian. He's also half Scottish. And he was one of those hybrids, and they love using hybrids. Anthony Zender's another hybrid. He's half African-American, half Polish. And they've been doing that a lot. They've been mixing the African and Egyptian DNAs, also Asian DNAs, into European DNAs, and to maximize certain energy potentials. One of the most powerful energy potentials is actually Scottish and Italian, and then another one is Egyptian and Scottish as well, and also Irish. Something about like the red-headed genetic, mixing that with the dark-skinned person. Apparently, it makes them a lot more psychic and a lot more powerful. So they've been mixing hybrids together on purpose. And now we might just call that mixed race, but when you engineer somebody from birth and there is some strange occurrences. I know KJ has some information on this about Dave Merrill's mother had some weird occurrences around his birth. He's definitely a hybrid baby. They mixed certain DNAs in with him, and they made him like literally a hybrid on purpose. So I think there's something going on there.
Yeah, Dave
Yeah,
is great. Wonderful.
I have a friend who told me that he found out they go into the hospital, and he was a newborn, and they went into the hospital and they just enhanced him, before his parents took him home, genetically altered him. So he was able to do a lot of things that normal people couldn't do, like, he could shoot a gun from extremely far away, and it would always hit the mark because his mind was guiding the bullet right to its mark. He was an assassin, and he had super hearing. He could hear, like, all the way across the house. And so you had to watch what you were saying, because he goes, "What? You talking about me?" That type of thing. So he was a very interesting fellow. He's no longer with us. He was enhanced. He was on a ship that was off. You might know more about this. There was there's a large series of 5 craft somewhere outside of Mars guarding a wormhole. Are you familiar with that? Do you have any information on that? And they're guarding against the Wolfen. The Wolfens are the one species of Wolfens. When they come through, they apparently just like destroy everything.
I know about the Wolfens, like the Wolfman from Sirius. Might be from Sirius C. That's it's basically like the Klingons in Star Trek. And I know, Janet, we talked about this briefly in another interview, but it's totally true. Basically, if you want to just imagine a Klingon in Star Trek, that's exactly what the Syrian Dak warrior is. It's a wolfman, like Anubis, like a wolf-headed being, but they act like the Klingons. They kind of look like the Klingons. I think just based on how they look and on different charts that they showed us at the LOC during our orientation, what's interesting in my recall is I don't remember a lot of audio, so I'm basing this on being shown like visual aids and visual stuff. But they showed us the Syrian people, and I think that what we think of as Africans is actually a very advanced, robust race that comes from Sirius C, and they are like Anubis. They're like at their core, they're actually a wolf-like people, and the Aryans or the Orions, the Fourth Reich. It's this old ET war that is still going on to this day, and I think that the reason, like to answer your question, the reason why they're on guard against the Wolfen race coming in is because that's actually a very powerful black genetic that the Aryan Orion Empire does not want to like burst the lid on the dome and reveal to everybody that obviously slavery was a joke, and this is an Aryan Orion reptilian perspective on a black genetic, which is actually very, very ancient and powerful, and have actually been trying to come back into the solar system for a while now, but the Aryan Orion reptilians have actually been keeping them at bay. But again, I'm just speculating.
Yeah, cool. Okay, Sasha, Kevin, you've been quiet. Are you with us?
Yeah, go ahead, listening. I'm just fascinated by all the knowledge. I'm just fascinated by all this knowledge. It's crazy.
Any comments, questions?
Nothing I can think of, no.
Okay.
I'll say something if you want.
Okay, go ahead.
What you're saying about your friend, that the similar thing happened to me, which I talked about in my first interview, where I was taken away from my mom at birth, and I had my genetics taken and probably manipulated in some way as well. But yeah, I have the Celtic, the Irish, and the Indian. I don't look Indian, obviously, but I have, my grandmother told me I have an Indian chief in Canada that is part of my family genetically. So, and they also do like, over time too, you get all the interbreeding with, I know like the Rockefeller family interbreeded with the Black Hawk Cherokee Indians. And they kind of dabbled in everything. But then you also have the off-planet species that want to help us as well. So they do have those too, and they do have, which is a whole nother topic for probably another show, but I call it womb gate, where some beings, enhanced beings, I guess you'd call them, super soldiers, whatnot, many of them have been through the experience of being passed through different wombs as during gestation of before they're born. And I know there's people that have talked about it where they say, my mom's not my only mom. I have more than one mother. And the concept is very hard to wrap your head around. But they do have the process of some species that want you to have the ability to connect to that species. They'll pass you through a mother of, from another solar system, another species, and then you'll be there for a few months, and then they'll pass you to another one, and then another one, and then you'll come back to your birth mother on Earth, and that's who you know as your mother. And that's who your mother thinks she's your only mother. So it's a highly controversial topic because it upsets a lot of women, mainly because the idea that maybe my child, I'm not the only mother, it's damaging to the ego, for one thing. And you have to pull away your emotions and think of it as a strategic, I guess, card to play for alliance species to help enhance certain beings to be able to connect to them when they need to. And it also helps carry on their race. If it's a race that's facing extinction, they're going to want to somehow interbreed with human beings. And so if you've been passed through like 3 mothers of different species, then you have ultimately you have to look at it in more of a positive way than negative, and understand that it's done to enhance you to be able to connect to those species. And if they were going to hurt you, they probably wouldn't have. It's giving you genetics in that sense, and that's just one way that it's done too. Not to mention like multiculturalism just on Earth. I mean, it happens in other places too, and it's a concept that not many people talk about, but it is something that is done. And a lot of women talk about they have phantom pregnancies where they think they're pregnant, because women know when they actually are, and then they realize, oh, I'm not. And doctors have chalked it up to that. It's called phantom pregnancy. But if you start, I know people that will have needle marks on their stomach or stretch marks, and they've never been pregnant. So there's a lot of like funky stuff going on in that department as well.
Yeah. It's also, like you said, like so controversial, like to think that a child has multiple mothers, was created by various mothers and various beings. It's a hard thing to wrap your head around, and right. No mother wants to say that their child isn't their child, right? And then also it's something that we need to look at if we're going to wrap our heads around this whole topic of disclosure, because that gets thrown around a lot. And I think when most people think disclosure, they're thinking like the chasing the UFO. We're going to have like just disclosure about the UFO files, but it goes a lot deeper than that. Full disclosure means addressing the hybrid program where, you have various beings that were created here on the planet, like actual humans, that they were actually moved around from mother to mother, during their gestation. And so it means they actually do have multiple mothers. And then also too, like what I was saying before, because of all the racial programming, the Cabal, their motto is divide and conquer. And they have used racial programming to such an extent that even the starseed topic in the New Age community, if you want to call it that, the New Age community with the starseeds, it can get really, really controversial, because you start saying, okay, this so the white genetic comes from Lyra, and it also comes from Orion. It comes from the Pleiades, okay, and then the black genetic comes from Sirius, okay, and then Asian genetic might come from like Tau Ceti and Andromeda, and okay, so you start saying these different starseed origins where all the different races come from, and what I've noticed is people in the New Age movement and in the Truth movement, they might understand what you mean when you start talking about the different races. But if you talk to the average person, like 90% of people, and you start saying, oh yeah, I think Africans come from this planet, or I think white people come from this planet, because of them, you know what I mean? Because of the racial programming, you really do start sounding like you're racist. And that is not your intent. You're talking about starseed history. And they're all equal as life. We're talking about ancient genetics. But what we're also talking about is that's only 1% of our DNA. We're actually just, so one thing I wanted to address was this whole thing about starseeds. That's the missing link. Because originally we were Homo erectus. We're 98% apus man. There's maybe 1.5, 1.4, if you really want to get down to the finite details, where you might have some starseed in you, and that actually has to do with the various races on the planet, and all the different ethnicities we have. But unfortunately, due to racial programming, once we start talking about that 1% that made us look just slightly different from everyone, there's so much racial programming out there that you might sound like you're actually discriminating, when really you're just talking about history, and you're talking about various ET races that came and tinkered with us in our prehistory and gave us the missing link. And it's such a huge topic, because even nowadays, I can't believe it, but even nowadays, race is still such a huge issue in the media. So it's like, how are we going to actually deal with full disclosure, if they actually gave us full disclosure, where they actually start going over where the races actually come from in the galaxy? Like, how are we going to deal with that? It's more than just them disclosing where the UFOs came from. It has to do with them disclosing where the races come from. And then this hybridization program where they're actually, like KJ was talking about, they're actually breeding people and designing people, like designer babies. They're actually moving babies around through various mothers, and so that you'll absorb some of their DNA from each mother, and they're creating a hybrid on top of a hybrid to create a specific being, probably for the program. You know what I mean?
Isn't that interesting that in Star Trek First Generation, the original series, Spock was moved around? Taken in and out.
Yeah, he's a hybrid. He's half human, half. That's a good point. He's half human, half.
But their explanation for why the mother, the Earth human mother, was able to carry him to term was that they had to, put him in, let him gestate for a while, move him out. I forget the whole explanation, but that was, 50, 60 years ago. It's like, wow, and it's what you're describing now, that they're moving these fetuses around so they get mitochondrial DNA from the various mothers.
And they've done that a couple of times in Star Trek. They've actually done that in Deep Space Nine. Kira, she has to absorb, I think, Miles's baby, the chief engineer. They have to move her baby around too. You're right. They did that with Spock, and then they, because of the Star Trek, they kind of repeat the same thing. You have this whole concept where even in Deep Space Nine, Kira, when she's pregnant, it was actually the Miles, I forget his wife's name, but anyway, the chief engineer, he has a baby with a woman, and they have to move the baby around, and they bring it up again. It's exactly what Cage is talking about, and they do it in Hollywood subtly, where in Star Trek, it's a common theme where a girl will get pregnant, and she has to move the baby to another mother. before it's born. It happens in Star Trek a couple of times.
So that's totally possible even now, right? To just move a fetus in our technology, human technology, but it's being repressed.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
People, if they're having problem pregnancies, they could move the fetus to a more viable womb or something that's healthier. Or, a lot of times you hear stories about the mother gets cancer and she wants to live long enough to give birth to their child. And so if this was released and known, that would solve that problem for millions of families that, the mother gets sick during the beginning of the pregnancy and may even die, but they don't give her chemo, or they don't give her treatment. I don't give her chemo, but they don't give her treatment because she's pregnant, right? Because of the fetus. But they could take the fetus and move it elsewhere.
Well, I mean, it depends on who they is. I mean, what I'm talking about is like off-planet species as far as Earth and pharmaceuticals. I don't know if that technology has been happening in a more general sense, like the way you're talking about. I think in the future it will be, but also coming with that in the future, you'll probably see much less sick people and much less mothers that need to have that done, because with that will come more technology and healing and free energy, and that's what I see.
Oh, that's the end of the show. Oh, goodness. We weren't paying attention. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We will continue another time. Okay, aloha.
Aloha.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at buyer risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
God is filling with
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at